Getting a bus for many is part of their daily routine. You may strike a conversation with someone or bump into old friends. Just make sure they don't keep following you when you get to your stop. It's time to take a seat, get comfortable, and let the darkness take control. Number 1. A guy I used to work with told me this story. He used to be a bus driver, and one night he was on his final route before his shift ended. It was late at night, and he had no passengers when he left the bus station. After driving for a while and passing several empty shelters, he finally arrived at a stop with someone waiting in it. He pulled up, opened the door, and a scraggly young man stepped on board and went to take a seat. Lack of personal hygiene aside, nothing about this young man raised any alarm bells, and the driver closed the door and continued his route as usual. No one else got on the bus, and the young man did not get off. Eventually the driver arrived at the station, parked inside it, and waited for the young man to leave. Except he didn't. Concerned at this point, since they'd apparently had passengers overdose in the past, the driver left his cab and checked the bus. No sign of the young man on the lower deck, so he checked the top deck. Aside from the driver, the bus was completely empty. There was only one door, none of the windows could open, and none of them were damaged. There was no way the young man could have gotten off the bus without the driver seeing him, or without leaving any evidence. Yet, there was no sign of him. Number 2. A few years ago, I was leaving my grad school office late around 10 PM to catch the bus home. I walked from the university campus via a relatively busy, well-lit street to the main north-south road in my area of the city, 109th Street in Edmonton. I was waiting for the bus at a shelter. As it's the middle of winter, snowing, and a bit cold, the buses ran about every 15 minutes. So I wasn't worried nor nervous, just patiently waiting to get home. I was listening to my music with my headphones when I noticed a guy walk up to the shelter. I looked up at him briefly, did that little Canadian half-smiler acknowledgement, and went back to listening to my music. A few minutes passed, and I could hear him start talking to me. Well, I assumed it was me. I was the only one around. I looked up, and he was staring right at me, smiling a bit oddly, and speaking to me. I took out my headphones and said, "Excuse me?" And he just kept smiling and blathering on, asking me about my day, the weather, and what I like to do. I don't know what it is about me, but I am a perennial people pleaser. I don't like confrontation, and my main aim in life would be to keep the peace. So I answered a few of his questions politely and as non-specifically as I could, with one earbud still in my ear. He just kept blathering on, and I was sort of just nodding politely. This went on for about 10 minutes, and I just had this sinking feeling in my stomach about this guy. Something was just a little off, but enough to make me nervous. After about 10 minutes, I could see the bus rolling up, which was a huge relief for me. No one else had arrived at the bus stop, and I could see at least 10 to 15 people already on the bus, which was great. I got on and sat near the front, and the guy sat across from me so that we could keep talking. I had originally intended to head to my own house, but after this guy decided to be my personal parrot, I decided screw it. I'm going to my boyfriend's. I was still getting an uncomfortable feeling from this guy, so I decided I would push the bus stop button early to see what the guy did. The bus came to stop at my request, and when the guy got up, he didn't move. "Isn't this your stop too?" he asked. "Whoops," I said. "I must have hit the wrong stop." He looked at me and said, "Oh, that's funny. I mixed up mine too. This isn't my stop either," and sat back down. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out. I hit the stop button for the next stop and text my boyfriend to come and meet me on 109th. I got up to leave the bus once it stopped, and creepy dude followed me. I crossed the road, and he followed, still talking away at me and asking questions. Once I got to the other side of the road, I told him that I had to go, and that my boyfriend was meeting me. He looked irritated at the idea of my boyfriend, and tried to walk with me a bit more, but I stopped and told him that I was walking on alone. "Can I have your number?" he asked. I panicked. I just froze. I decided to give him almost my phone number. Just the last 4 digits scrambled. I read it off to him, said goodnight, and started walking away quickly. I had made it maybe 20 steps away, and I could hear someone jogging after me. "Hey, I think there was a mix-up. I tried calling the number and it wasn't you." He jogged right up to me and was still wearing that same smile as before. How weird. I grabbed my phone and pretended to check it for a missed call and quickly text my boyfriend. I told him I was terrified and that he needed to get here now. "So, what's your real number then?" he asked. I honestly didn't know what I could have done. I think I would have just given him my real number. I had no idea what to do. It was cold, it was like winter. It was dark in this little residential neighborhood, and I knew I couldn't outrun him. Luckily for me, my boyfriend came running up. He's 6'3" and somewhat imposing. I turned to the guy and say, "Have a good night," and jogged up to my boyfriend and just launched myself at him. I didn't look back at the creepy dude, but I did tell my boyfriend to make sure the doors were all locked and the windows all closed before we went to bed that night. So creepy bus dude, let's not meet again. Number 3. So this happened a while back when I was in my early 20s. I was working for a little retail store in my town's mall. I was coming up to the end half of the day, and I didn't know how I noticed it, but an older man, probably in his 50s, had walked past my store at least 3 to 4 times. Not consecutively, just every now and again. Now I worked in one of those little costume jewelry shops, so it was odd for an older male to be walking past so many times, but I kind of didn't think anything of it. I don't even know how I picked up on it in the first place, really. It came to closing time, and I had left to catch my bus home at around 6:30 p.m. I remember it was transitioning into winter, because it was dark by then. I'm a very paranoid person, and I still live by the stranger danger rules. So even now when I leave work, I make sure I change my outfit into something less fashionable. I don't like drawing attention to myself in any way possible, so I try to make sure I'm covered up and as average looking as I can be. I don't know why, but I have that disease where I attract the wrong attention for no reason at all. As I said, I was waiting for my bus home, sitting by myself at the town centre's bus terminal. And guess who walks past? The older man. At this point I kind of feel a little uneasy, but in my head, I try to make reason prevail, as many people take buses all the damn time. My bus showed up and I got on. And well, you can guess who got on after me. I remember sitting in the seats facing inwards, the ones for the wheelchair and pram, and he sat at the first seat above the step. I remember staring forward, but not wanting him to know that I noticed him. The whole bus ride I waited to see if he got off before my stop, thinking it was just my over-anxious and paranoid mind working overtime. He didn't, so I pressed the button for my stop. I waited until the last possible second to press it, and as soon as I stood up, so did he. I went to walk out the front door of the bus, and he exited the rear. At that moment, as soon as he stepped off, I sat back down again. I had no idea where the bus went after my stop, but honestly I didn't care. I will never forget the look on his face as the bus drove off. I've never seen so much hate and anger in someone's face than I did through that window. His face is burnt into my memory like a photograph. It still absolutely terrifies me to this day. I have absolutely no idea what would have happened to me if I got off my bus stop late at night, with him right there. But I'm glad my paranoia was so intense that I didn't. So creepy older man following me home? Let's not meet. Number 4. I grew up in rural Michigan and rode the bus to school every morning. We lived in a house at the bottom of a hill on a country road. My bus stop, however, was at the top of the hill after you passed my house. The story I'm about to tell you happened when I was around 8 years old. I woke up one morning and got ready for school just as I usually did, and my bus picked me up around 7 AM, right when the sun was starting to come up a little, but there were still spots of darkness deep in the woods. I was the only kid who was picked up from my bus stop, so I would stand at the edge of the woods and wait until the bus came. My mum or dad would have to drop me off 5 minutes before the bus came and hightail it to work in order to make it there for 8. It's not that they felt completely comfortable doing this, but they didn't have many options. We lived in a safe area, or so we thought, and the bus arrived on time 99% of the time, so they weren't too worried that anything would happen to me in the 5 minutes I was left alone. So I'm standing there, cold as shit, waiting for the bus to come, watching the sunrise slowly in the sky. It's still a little dark outside, but yet bright enough for me to see what's going on around me. I saw the lights of the bus in the distance on time as usual, and it came to a stop right in front of me. My driver, Mrs. Teresa, opened the door and said good morning, and gestured for me to hop on. I walked to my seat, put my stuff down, but noticed that the bus wasn't moving yet. Mrs. Teresa still had the door ajar, and she just sat there, leaning slightly out of her seat, staring into the woods. After a good minute or so, we were off on our way to school, after picking up a few more kids. Arriving at school, Mrs. Teresa escorted us in, which is something that she never did, and I remember seeing her slip into the office and talking to one of the secretaries. I went through my regular school day, and I was picked up by my dad, as normal. When he picked me up though, he started asking me all kinds of questions. Bus pickup go okay this morning, champ? Did any cars stop or blow the horn at you as you waited? Strange questions that he'd never asked me before. The next morning, my parents did not take me to the bus stop. Mum dropped me off at school before going into work at a later time. This continued alternating as a drop-off for my mum or dad for the remainder of the school year. At the same time, I noticed that they changed my bus stop. Years later, I found out why my bus driver went into school that day, and why my bus stop was relocated. When Mrs. Teresa picked me up that morning, she saw a man standing in the woods behind where I was, just staring at me. She alerted the school secretary, who alerted the transportation office for the school district, and then the police. The police investigated and found some items wrapped up in a black t-shirt in the woods. A hunting knife, rope, a rag or washcloth, and tape. The police never found out who the shirt belonged to, but my bus driver, my parents and the police felt certain that whoever it belonged to had the worst of intentions, and probably for me. I think about this often, and wonder what would have happened to me had the bus driver been a few minutes late, or had she not noticed the man standing in the woods after I boarded the bus. Because of this instinct, my school district changed my bus stop to be located right in front of my house. That way, I could stay in my house until the bus pulled up. No more standing by the woods for me. I resumed riding the bus to school next year. And creepy bus stop man, let's not meet. And thanks, Mrs. Teresa, for most likely saving my life. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Happy National Lazy Day. I hope you've all been as unproductive as possible. And hopefully you get a chance to kick back and relax at the end of the day anyway. As is customary, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to smash that like button and subscribe, as you won't want to miss what I have in store for you next. You know, I think paranormal stories are long overdue, so I'm going to be releasing some videos about ghosts and strange happenings in the coming days. Submitted by you guys. So if you have a story that you wish to share, be sure to send it over to me quickly. Or you could now submit it to my official Reddit page. So if you'd rather submit your story there, feel free. I'd love to see you guys head on over there to show it some love. Link in the description. Don't forget that you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter @TheMortisMedia for some secret stuff that you will not find anywhere else. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. I've got to catch a bus. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.